This video is just a refresher for those candidates who are about to go through their NPTC crosscut and maintenance assessment for chainsaws. So there are two halves to it. One's a load of questions, which we've got here, and everybody should have this schedule, and the other half is the practical. So on my YouTube channel, let's just see. So this is the chainsaw assessment revision playlist. So look, there you go. Videos, playlist, channels, discussion. So you just go to playlist, find this one, just click on it, and here you go. So you got chainsaw bar maintenance, spark plugs, not totally critical, but gives you a bit of background. There are a couple of felling ones there that are not relevant at the moment. How to cross-cut timber using the boring technique to prevent trapping your saw. That's an important one because there is a question about that. This one you'll get some more background. Chainsaw abuse, bad sharpening. And of course there's how to waterproof your boots, which is not in the assessment, but you might find that quite interesting. Anyway, back to the schedule. So this is page 5 of the schedule. The rest, there's loads of stuff in front of it. So everybody should have one of these. Right, question 1. Identify the hazards. How do you identify hazards in a wood? Go and get out the truck, get on your feet and go and wander about. Okay, and then it goes, assessor guidance. 3 hazards. Identify 3 hazards to do with the working area, and 3 hazards with the proposed work. So you've got to identify some hazards and what you're going to do about them. Yeah. Power lines, 2 tree lengths, exclusion zone. Water courses, keep your fuel away from them and be aware of them and don't fell into them. Weather, stop in adverse conditions. We could have public footpaths. That's a good one, yeah. Just signs and barrier tape and that sort of thing. Hazards with the work, well, you're using a chainsaw, so the control measures there would be PPE and training. You've also got felling trees, so you've got the correct distance apart from operatives, which is 2 tree lengths. PPE training. Hanging dead wood. And you've got to be careful of that and be aware of it and don't go underneath it. Dead trees, same sort of thing. Slips, trips and falls. You've got to keep a tidy site so you're not forever tripping over and getting tangled up with all the brash. Fueling point, again, central fueling point. So it's not only a meeting point but a safe place to put the fuel. And of course the fuel would be out of the sun, in a fairly sort of level area, at least 30 metres away from a watercourse or a pond. You'll have your first aid kit there, etc, etc. So that's question 1. It sounds like a right old rant, but it's asked for 3. 3 for the area and 3 for the work. Then once you've done that, you've got question 2, which is emergency plan. Well, emergency plan, basically, if you've been, say you've been working on 3 sites in one day, and so it's getting towards the end of the day, you can't remember where you are, never mind who you are, and so all you want is a list of stuff. So if somebody hurts themselves, instead of being a gibbering idiot, this is in the front of the truck and you can just look at it and read it out. So you've got where you are, the location name and the grid reference. That's 2 answers and it's looking for 5. Meeting place, that's a meeting place to meet the emergency services. So like if there's 3 of you, one of you'd go down to the local road and stand there, with your forestry helmet and some high vis on, waiting for the ambulance. Yeah, that's nearest access point, same sort of thing. Location name, well, we've got location name. Yeah, so type of access, whether it's sort of an ambulance can get there or it's four-wheel drive. Suitable helicopter landing area for the air ambulance. Phone number of the nearest A&E. That's always required, but I can't see too much why. And your immediate supervisor, etc. The phone number thereof. So then question 3, the legislation. The main thing here is that you're supposed to know about the Health and Safety at Work Act and the general rules that apply. Once you've been trained, you're responsible for yourself. Yeah, and so therefore employers don't want to get you to do stuff you're not trained for, because they're fully responsible for you. So if you hurt yourself, it's them. But when you're trained, if you hurt yourself, you've got equal responsibility, and you're supposed to go, you've asked me to do something dangerous, leave it out, John. The other one is provision of work equipment regulations, where the equipment should be suitable for purpose. Yeah, as far as the chainsaw is concerned, it should be fully operational, and all the safety features should be in place. And here we've got one purpose of the Arboricultural and Forestry Advisory Group. Well, that's out of date now, because they have to keep changing things. They're not happy with keeping stuff, and that's the advice. Now they've got FISA, the Forestry Industry Safety Accord, and they do all these guides. Here you go. Look, just stick the saw in like that. No, when you're introducing the saw, it should be like that for cross-cutting. Yeah, and you've got tension and compression here, which we will talk about a bit later on. So download these and have a look at them. Right, then the last one on this page, work in a way which maintains health and safety. Yeah, and is consistent with the relevant legislation, which is generally just apply the rules. So that's just assessor to observe. Okay, so the assessor must just go, is he doing it right? If not, a bit of guidance here and there. But if you consistently wander about with the chain brake off, and take one hand off the saw when the chain brake's off, and perhaps take your helmet off and leave it at the bottom of the tree and carry on, then you're stuffed. There's another assessor observe here. Carry out work to minimise environmental damage. Don't go sort of flailing fuel around and leaving the tops off cans and all that sort of thing, and throwing your lunch wrappers in the nearest drain. Appropriate tools, assessor to observe. Next one, 5.6. Explain why it is important to maintain chainsaws to manufacturers' recommendations. This is easy. It's safer to use, it takes less effort, you use less fuel and oil, it's always going to be working properly. But you only want one reason. Safety features, state them all. You shall learn this lot. On-off switch, chain brake, exhaust, nice and tight and facing away from the operator. Rear knuckle guard as part of the bottom handle. Anti-kickback or low kickback chain. That's the guard links or the ramps on the depth gauges. AV, anti-vibration mounts, that's the rubber or the spring mounts. The dead man's handle on the trigger, on the throttle. The guide bar cover. The chain catcher. And, this is also a bit of a weird one, the symbols. Well, if you've been trained to use a chainsaw, you shouldn't need the symbols, but it's in the list. Work on that one. You should better roll them off quite easily and start at one point on the saw and work round the saw and back again. Don't go one like this because you'll never remember. Have a system. Start at, say for instance, the dead man's handle trigger, then down to the knuckle guard, then forward to the chain catcher, then forward again to the anti-kickback chain, then to the then you've got the, see, I missed one, you've got the bar cover, then you've got the exhaust, then you've got the chain brake, then the AV, etc, etc. Check if they're all in right condition. If they're not, either fix it or label it so to stop anybody else using it, and get it fixed. Down here, select appropriate maintenance tools. Assessor to observe. Okay, that's always an appointment. Look in here, assessor to observe. We're still looking, even though we're not asking you about it. Right, this lot here, this is explain the function of all these bits, and then the next one is do it, which is a bit of a pain in the neck. So I just ask it all in one big lump. Right, so we'll just use this one, but you could use the next question, 2.3, equally the same. Spark plug, what does it do? It ignites the fuel air mixture. Yeah. If in doubt, change it. The gap should be about 0.6 of a mil. You would get the gap setting from your manual, and you'd use a feeler gauge for setting it. Air filter. How do you clean it? How do you take it off? How do you clean it? If it's a cleanable one, then you would just brush it off with a paintbrush, just a light paintbrush, a clean one. If you need to clean it, then hot soapy water. None of this nonsense of put it in the pocket of your overalls and put it in the washing machine. You want to clean it now, not the end of the week. So hot soapy water. When you've finished washing the pots in the evening, just a bit of fairy liquid or something and some warm water, clean it and let it dry. Yeah, I mean, you can use an airline if you want, but that blast doesn't do the filter medium that much good. Where else have we got? Chain brake. Now this is a bit of a weird one. So I normally move to how do you change the sprocket. So we talk about sprockets there, and the main thing here is still, it's all on the outside. Undo the clip, pull the sprocket off. Let's assume you've got a spur sprocket where the sprocket is part of the clutch drum. Pull that off. You know you're going to change it because it's worn out, or it's got more than, according to still, 0.5 of a mil wear. But we all know what happens there. But you know, the standard answer was change it every 3 chains, because you don't want to put a brand new chain on a really quite worn sprocket. So when you put 3 chains through it, change the sprocket. The main bit here is grease the bearing. That poor little bearing's doing 1,000 revs when the saw's ticking over. Chain's not moving. The bearings, the engine's running, the bearings taking all the difference. So, and the only lube it ever gets is the grease you put on it, because the chain oil doesn't get to it. You know, because of centrifugal force. The oil only pumps when the chain's moving, and when the oil gets on the chain, it flings it outwards. It doesn't allow it to dribble back in. With Husqvarna, different again. With a lot of the Husqvarnas where you've got an outboard clutch, so therefore it's an inboard sprocket, you'll need to use a piston stop, take the plug out, use a piston stop to undo the outboard clutch, and then it's much the same. So you need to know how to do that. We're only talking about it, we don't actually have to do it, but once we've talked about that, we can then talk about the chain brake band, inspecting the chain brake band. It's a silver band, inside silver coloured band. You know, we're looking for cracks, bluing, thinning, any sort of problems, and if you come across any, just change it. So that's that one. The clutch here, basically have a look at the springs. If there's a spring missing, the clutch won't work right, so just inspect the springs. Exhaust, make sure it's tight. It's designed, it says direct fumes away from operator. We already know that, we've already talked about that, but it's got to be tight. 2 reasons: lets more noise out, and if it's loose it keeps rattling and damages the threads, and so therefore it'll never tighten up. Starter mechanism, just check if the tension's correct. Here we go. So that's supposed to spring up like that, and the test for over tightness is pull the cord all the way out like that. Okay, and you've got to have a bit more turn in the spring. So if you pull it all the way out, you still don't bind the spring up. And whilst we're here, these holes for ventilation, the air goes in there, round the fan, and then round the cylinder fins. So the other part of the cooling system is the cylinder fins, which this must be kept clean and the fins must be kept clean. Greasing, we've talked about greasing the sprocket bearing. If you've got a Husky, then you can grease the nose bearing. Guide bar, there is a guide bar video, so check that one out. Yeah. Fuel and oil filters. Fuel filter, hook it out with a bit of bent wire and replace it. Oil filters, you can't do that. Whatever anybody tells you, 95% of them, you can't do it. So what do? Well, on for instance like the Husky 350s, they're under a little plate. They're fixed in place, but there's a little plate from access from underneath and you can get to them. But I say tip the oil out, and you'd be amazed at how much gunge is in the bottom of those oil tanks, and then wash it out with paraffin or a non-flammable degreasant. So here's the end of the next section. That's the practical side of that. And of course the main thing is with the any oils and fuels, how do you get rid of contaminated oils and fuels and all sorts of bits in the appropriate container? That'll do. Yeah, you don't just pour it down the nearest rabbit hole. Next question, cutter types. There's a chisel which has got a sharp corner, and there's a semi chisel which has got a rounded corner. Okay, when would you use either of them? I'd be happy if you said I use a semi chisel all the time, or you would say I use a chisel for cutting quick in softwoods. Good enough. Right, next bit, 5.4. Explain how to select the correct filing information. This can be easy and dead simple, right? Or it can be a pain in the neck. Okay, so you've got to know about pitch and cutter type. So you could easily go measure between 3 rivets, divide by 2. That gives you the pitch. Okay, and the cutter type, is it rounded over or is it a square corner? Then look in the book, and if you've got a Lantra manual or some sort of chain identification manual, put a cross next to your chain, so then you can, and read it all, because there's the filing angle, which is the important one, the file size. Is it a 4mm for a Pico chain? Is it a 4.8mm for a 325? Or is it a 5.2 or a 5.5mm file for a 3/8? You've got to know this stuff. And then the next thing is the depth gauge setting. Now, I could rant on forever about this, but there are 3 basic depth gauge setting tools. They're all the same, but they've got a different step in them. There's a 0.45 for the Pico Mini Micro. There's 0.65 for the majority of other chains. And then there's 0.8 for the 404 pitch. So get the wrong one and you need to know what happens. So you put a 0.8mm depth gauge on a Pico chain and you're taking far too much off the depth gauges, and you'll either stall the saw or it'll kick like a good one. Using a 0.45 depth gauge on a 325 chain, the depth gauge is not low enough, and so all you're going to get is sawdust. It can't see enough wood to cut. Hopefully that makes sense. Think about it. Right, where else are we? That's another rant. Right, reason for cutter length. Right, when you're sharpening a chain, you always start with the most damaged, and you sharpen that one so it's like a razor, and then you make all the rest exactly the same. Why? Because if you don't, only half of the cutters are working. The rest are being shaded by the other higher cutters. And it will vibrate like mad. And if you've got big teeth on one side and small teeth on the other, it'll cut in a curve. Yeah, and how many times have I seen people felling trees where the saw is diving down into the muck, because you could see instantly the chain's not sharp and the teeth are all over the place. So also, it says here, increased vibration, inaccurate cutting, increased risk of kickback. We've talked about depth gauges. I've gone on incessantly about that. So depth gauges, right, you've got to have it right. You either too low, vibration and excess kickback, too high, sawdust and not cutting very well and just wasting fuel and oil. So maintain the cutting system. Assessor to observe. Next page, 5.3. Describe the problems encountered when the chain and guide bar are worn. I've covered some of those already, but it asks for 3 for the guide bar. Okay, so it could be bent. Okay, in which case it won't cut straight, and it'll just be a pain in the neck, and it won't enter the timber. The rails could be uneven. One rail's lower because this side has had bigger teeth and this side's smaller, so therefore there's more wear on this side. It'll cut in a curve. The oil hole blocked, so it'll overheat, and that goes along with poor lubrication. Excessive burrs will mean that there's bits of burrs sticking out the side, but also when they break off, they take half the rail with them. So therefore then the rail's a lot thinner at that point and it will wear quicker. There's all sorts of things. Have a look at my chainsaw bar maintenance video, and you pick up on that. 3 for the chain. We've already talked about different sized teeth, wrong setting on the depth gauge. What else have we got? If you run a chain slack, then the cutter sits back and the heel of the cutter digs into the bar. So not only does it damage the bar, but also it wears away the heel down to the rivet, so it could snap. Bits missing, really blunt and rounded over teeth, all sorts of stuff. Vibration, there you go, vibration and vibration white finger. Yeah, that's an important health and safety issue. Reassemble it. When you're putting the bar back on, turn it over so it's the other way up to even out the wear. Then you've got clean and tidy area. We've already talked about disposing of stuff. Describe the correct methods. If you just, If you've covered it before, that's good enough. Yeah. Then you got another one, dispose of waste in line with legislation. Well, what on earth's that one? Yeah. Right. Assessor to observe, assessor to observe, assessor to observe. Clean and tidy and watching. Really messy, well, we'll have words. Identify appropriate PPE. I've just got to have a look. Right, now then, all you budding arborists that are about 16 or 17 or even 18 years old, don't turn up with an arborist helmet, right, and a designer set of shades. You need a forestry helmet with a full face visor. There's all the bits and pieces here. Non-snag clothing, so no Doctor Who scarves. And if you got dreadlocks, do something about them, as in, tuck them away or whatnot. You've got to wear gloves, and you've got to have a first aid kit, a personal first aid kit, which includes a large wound dressing. And they should all the PPE should have the little chainsaw in a shield symbol, or a CE number.